In this lecture, we're going to focus on some of the building blocks, some of the foundational level terms and ideas that we need to be effective managers. So if you recall, managerial accounting is basically providing tools for managers in order to make better decisions, to help them make their decisions. So let's start with just a general overview of the different types of businesses that we run into. Basically, we're going to break it down into three general categories. We have a service business, a merchandising business, and a manufacturing business. Now, for purposes of this class, we're going to keep our businesses very pure, meaning there's a lot of businesses out there that do multiple things, right? Take a company like Amazon. They're a service, they also manufacture some things, and they also obviously sell a lot of things. That's not a very good company to help learn the basics with. So when we talk about any of this stuff in this course, we're going to try to keep it to businesses that are pure. Like, for example, a service company that just provides a service. So a service company provides intangible value. In other words, you're not getting something that has a body that's got a. So let's start with a service company. With a service company, you're selling a service. So we're going to look at a pure service, meaning we're not going to sell any kind of products, and we're not going to do any kind of manufacturing. So we're providing a service which is intangible, meaning there's nothing physical associated with it. The service provides value to the customer. For example, someone who, let's just take trees, right? A service of cutting down trees for residential customers. You're not getting any kind of manufacturing in there. You're not getting any kind of manufacturing or retail sales or anything like that. Let's see. The next one is merchandising. So with merchandising, what we're doing is we're reselling tangible products. So products that have a physical presence. Now we have two types of merchandising, right? So we have retailers, and a retailer sells to the final consumer. So that would be like Walmart sells to you, and then you use the product. And then we have wholesalers. So with wholesale, there's the expression was there was a middleman. So a wholesaler would buy from the manufacturer and then sell to the retailer. So a company might buy from a manufacturer and then sell in quantity to, say, Walmart, which is a retailer. And then we have manufacturers. So with manufacturers, we're converting raw material into a finished good. So we have a raw material, and we're going to convert that to a finished good. So because of that, we have various types of inventory, which we'll learn. There's actually three. One, we have raw material. That's the basics material that we're going to use to build the finished good. Then we have, we'll skip down. We're going to convert that to the finished good. The finished good is what we're going to sell. So in the middle here, number two, is what we call work in process. So work in process would be anything that we're building that's not quite done yet by the manufacturer. So throughout this class, we're going to think about the company as either being a pure service, a pure merchandiser, and a pure manufacturer. We're not looking at companies that are going to kind of cross over and do different things. It's much easier to learn that way. Now, these businesses create what they call a value chain. So let's talk about that for a second. So a value chain is basically activities that add value to a product or service. So let's take a basic company that we're all familiar with. Let's take Ford, right? Now, Ford doesn't just build cars, right? Ford builds cars, but they're not just doing the car building to load up on cars somewhere. They're building the cars and then they're, selling them. So there's a sales element. There's the logistics of delivering the cars to the dealerships. All those things go into it. So let's look at just a typical value chain that you might see at Ford. So we have research and development, right? So that's part of the value chain, developing things, better parts for the car, better cars in general. Then we have to take that research and development, and the engineers need to put that into the design of the car. Then we have the production of the vehicles, right? So that's going to be going on in the factory. Then we have the marketing, right? You got to get word out to buy our cars. Then we have distribution, and then we have stuff like customer service, right? After the sale, we still need Ford to a certain extent. So this is a good example of a value chain. It might not be complete, but just a good example. Every business is going to have their own value chain, slightly different. And the thing that I want you to remember is that this value chain is integrated, meaning that that if you're in marketing, you're going to have implications on the design of the car. If you're in design, you're going to have implications into how things are produced. So your production facilities are going to have implications on the customer service. So because it's a chain, the cliche is, you're only as strong as the weakest link. It's important for business to understand their value chain so that they can can make improvements along the way. Now, a key element of managerial accounting is what they call cost management. That's one of the main focus areas that we're going to have in this class, and that is on managing costs. So let's get kind of an overview of how that's going to kind of look, right? First of all, managers who want to categorize the different things that are going on in their business, right? They're going to take a business that does a bunch of things, and they're going to break it up into parts and analyze each of the different parts. It's very common for managers to do that kind of thing. So one way for the managers to analyze the organization is by looking at the cost object. So the cost object is anything for which the managers want to know the cost. Pretty simple, right? Think of it as what they're going to focus on regarding cost. So here's some common ways we can look at cost objects. First of all, we might look at the product as a cost object. So if you have multiple products, you sell shoes, you sell hats, you sell ties, that would be each of those would be cost object. Or you can do it another way. You can look at let's see, geographic regions, right? So your cost object might be the North Division or the South Division, or departments in your organization. Like we have the accounting department, we have HR department. So those might be cost objects. So all we're doing is we're looking at breaking up the business into these cost objects so we can see how much they cost in those areas. And managers will be looking at these for different reasons. So when you're looking at the cost object, anything that's a direct cost, right, has a direct association with the cost object. Let's say you look at your cost object as one of your department stores, right? So let's say that's your cost object is this department store. Then anything that's directly associated with a department store is a cost. Anything that's directly associated with that department store is a direct cost. Indirect costs are costs that are indirectly associated, right? So let's take something like the delivery of goods in your store to the customers, right? Maybe you have some delivery, but this is done for all the department stores, not just the one you're looking at as your cost object. That's an indirect association. And when you have something like that, you have to do an allocation. So allocation of cost object basically just means that. It means that you're going to split up the cost in some way to assign it to the cost object, right? So let's think of an example here. Let's say our cost object is the Ford Focus, right? So the Ford Focus. So anything that's a direct association with the cost object is going to be a direct cost. So this means it's anything that's directly with the Ford Focus, just that particular product, is going to be a direct cost. So it could be the cost of the engine, the battery that goes into the Ford Focus, the steering wheel, the tires. These are costs that go directly into the Ford Focus, so these costs have a direct association. Pretty straightforward. But then what about indirect costs, right? So these would all be my, let's move it down. These would be my direct cost for the Ford Focus as the cost object. And then let's say indirect cost. Let's say the utility cost, the electricity. Sorry. So electricity used in the whole factory, not just to build the Ford Focus, but to build the Ford Focus and the F-150 and the other cars too. So that means that needs to be allocated. So we need to take some of that cost and we need to put it towards the Ford Focus. By allocation, that means we have to divide up between the different areas, in this case the different cars that are being built in the factory. So let's say we build, we have the electricity, maybe we also have insurance on the factory. Alright, so we have insurance on the factory. The factory builds a bunch of different things. One of the things they build is a Ford Focus, so we have to take some of the cost of the insurance and we have to put it towards the Ford Focus. So those are indirect costs because they don't have a direct association. It's not like insurance just on the Ford Focus facility. That would be a direct cost. This is insurance for all the cars that are made there, different kinds of cars, and we just need to take part of it and put it towards the Ford Focus. If it was something that directly went into the Ford Focus, that would be a direct cost in this case. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, what is the cost object? Let's look at this example for cost object S2-4. So we have this example. It's classify each of the following costs as direct or indirect. Right? So this is for the Stowe Kohl's department store. Now, before you go about answering any of these questions, before you can tell me if Junior's department sales clerks are direct or indirect, first thing you have to do is know what the cost object is. So that's the first thing in these kinds of questions you have to ask yourself is, what is the cost object? In this case, it's the Junior's department. So anything directly associated with the Junior's department is going to be a direct cost. Things that are not directly associated with the Junior's department are indirect costs. So take the first one, A. We'll look at a few of these. We're not going to go through each. A is the Junior's department sales clerk. Well, these are sales clerks just in the Junior's department. So they're a direct association. So these are obviously direct cost for A. And the same for B, cost of Junior's clothing. We're not talking about cost of all clothing. We're talking about just the Junior's clothing. So that's a direct association. But then we get to C, and this is a good example of an indirect cost because it's all the hangers used in that store. So the cost of all the hangers used in the store, means that you have to take the cost and allocate it between the different departments. In other words, split it up. So if you spent $100,000 on hangers, how are you going to put part of that $100,000 towards the juniors department? We're going to have to come up with some method, maybe the number of hangers used or the square footage of the juniors department, or some method is going to have to be used to split the cost up, because it's not directly associated, it's an indirect association. It's all the hangers in the building. Same with D, all the electricity in the building. Let's say they spent $10,000 on electricity for 1 month. How are we going to allocate part of that to the juniors department? That is an indirect association, because it's not like they just have their own, electrical circuit board just for the juniors department, and the electrical company just sends them a bill to the juniors department. They send a bill to the entire store, and now we're going to have to split it up. And whenever you have that indirect association, they call that an indirect cost. So you get the picture. So anything that's specifically for the juniors department of the rest of these is going to be a direct cost. Anything that's for a bigger part of the organization, maybe the entire store, the entire company, then you're going to have to allocate part. That's an indirect cost. So that's kind of how you go about doing this. So do the rest of these and practice this, as it's an important part of this learning objective.